CEO of Black Enterprise. Thanks for joining me this week's all-new episode of From the Corner Office. With the beginning of the new year, our nation continues to face crises and uncertainty on all fronts and at all levels. The public health and economic devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic remain evident. The promise of racial reconciliation is nowhere close to being realized. And the recent attack on Capitol Hill, our seat of democracy, has caused greater deterioration of overall confidence in our government institutions. To tackle these issues, among other developments, requires a new brand of bold, game-changing political leadership. My guest today is former Citigroup Vice Chairman Raymond J. McGuire, who plans to bring a no-nonsense, intentional focus to government as he seeks to become the mayor of New York City, the world's most important commercial, financial, and cultural center. Let me share a bit of his background. A native of Dayton, Ohio, he was raised by a single mother who worked as a social worker and his grandparents. After years of taking a bus to a private school in Dayton, he was offered a scholarship to transfer to the elite Hotchkiss School, a Connecticut boarding school which placed him on the path to Harvard, in which he attended the university as an undergrad, as well as earning degrees from both the law school and business school. In 1984, he began his professional career at First Boston Corp. From there, Ray would hold pivotal positions at Wasserstein Perella and Company, the Mergers and Acquisitions Group at Merrill Lynch, and as global co-head of M&A at Morgan Stanley. He joined Citigroup in 2005 and ultimately rose to the position of vice chairman and chairman of banking, capital markets, and advisory before recently retiring from the firm to pursue his political ambitions. For over 3 decades, Black Enterprise has covered his ascension in which he engaged in corporate transactions valued at more than $500 billion. He applied his deal-making prowess, strategic mind, and a bit of swagger to vault to the top of this hyper-competitive arena and was cited in each of our lists as one of the most powerful Blacks on Wall Street. Beyond his business accomplishment, Ray has spent decades focused on social and educational issues. In fact, he used his position to speak out on racial justice issues and has advocated for corporate leaders to do more to combat systemic racism. He co-authored an impactful report stating that racism has cost the US economy some $16 trillion since the year 2000. As a result, Citi pledged to spend $1 billion over the next 3 years to try to close the racial wealth gap. To address such issues and drive opportunities, he has served on boards such as the New York City Police Foundation, Studio Museum in Harlem, New York Presbyterian Hospital, the New York Public Library, and Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, among others. He played critical roles as a member of Senator Kamala Harris's Finance Committee during her presidential run and the Cultural Affairs Advisory Commission, which he was appointed to by outgoing New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio in 2015. Encouraged to run for mayor as a first-time candidate, he has attracted wide support from both the political and business communities, including campaign co-chairs Valerie Jarrett, former advisor to President Barack Obama, and Charles Phillips, former CEO of a software company, Infor. As he faces a crowded field in the New York City primary in June, he expects to emerge from this pack by stressing that his business acumen will help solve our complex problems and set a new direction for New York City. Ray, it's an honor. Thank you for joining me.
Butch, it's my honor, given your leadership of Black Enterprise and the shoulders in which we stand. Your father has been extraordinary to all of us, and it's given us an opportunity to see what's possible over the past 50 years. So the honor is mine. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
You're quite welcome. You're quite welcome. We started this year off with a very, very strange way, obviously. It's a pleasure to have you. I would like for you to share with the audience first a little bit about your background, because it would be interesting to know from your childhood, humble beginnings, what put you on the path to ultimately pursuing investment banking and Wall Street, if you will. and then ultimately your political ambitions. But let's start from the beginning of when you were in Dayton and your ambition to move towards Harvard and ultimately investment banking.
So Dayton, Ohio, I can't tell you that we described it as an ambition. It was more survival. It is making certain that education, that we get an education. As you referenced, I was raised by my single mother and my grandparents on the other side of the tracks. And she was a social worker. And, she raised me and my two brothers. And at any point in time, we had half a dozen foster children in our home. And I grew up across the street from the Howard paper mill, Butch, and sometimes that paper mill emitted fumes that were so strong that the only way we could breathe is open up the refrigerator. And so they talked today about environmental justice. Well, I kind of lived environmental justice. Nobody for us to call. We didn't have masks then. So we had to suffer through that. And from that vantage point, I can remember in fifth grade, there was a teacher who called my mother and said, your son has something here, and there's a new school that's starting out in the suburbs, and you might want to think about him going there. And so we had no money, but we somehow got to this school and got a scholarship. And I was there from the 6th grade to the 11th grade. 11th grade, there was a teacher who saw that I had some talent. I had a 4.0 average. Okay. I was president of the school, and I averaged 28 points per game playing ball. And she said, Ray, if you're as good as they say you are, I want you to go test yourself against the big boys and girls in the East. So I took a Greyhound bus by myself at 16 around New England looking for the big boys and girls in the East. And I found them beginning at Hotchkiss. But it was all through my mother's sacrifice. So it wasn't ambition, it was survival, it was getting education, which is a primary thing. The most important thing, the two important things growing up were going to church and going to school. And that's my foundation. That's how I started. That's the bottom, I guess is what they call it.
What did you find at Hotchkiss that you were attracted to? What was it about Hotchkiss in particular, and then ultimately leading you to Harvard? What was it that you?
It was. It's actually interesting because it all comes down to teachers, right? There was a teacher in the 5th grade. There was actually Miss Rickman in the 4th grade, Miss Moore in the 5th grade, and then in the 11th grade there was Mrs. Melnick, Robin Melnick. And then when I got to Hotchkiss, I ran into this teacher, George Norton Stone, and he was as irreverent and as East Coast as it gets. And it was his mentorship and his taking me under his wing, discovering me, that said, okay, I'm going to go to this school. I knew nothing about it, zero about it. It's a whole nother world.
Right.
Well,
And then when you got to Harvard, that must have really opened up your eyes to what the possibilities that existed in this world are. Because people come from obviously all over the world to go to a school like Harvard. But you didn't just do undergrad there. You decided to pursue both law and business school. A lot of people choose either or, they'll choose neither, but you decided to do both. And so what was it that made you decide you thought that having a law degree would help you in business, or having a business degree would help you in law?
I wish that were that complicated. It wasn't. It was education. It was education. And so I fancied myself being a lawyer based on a television character by the name of Perry Mason. And I was going to go to law school anyway. And then there was a I guess you call him a pre-professional tutor, Larry Jackson, a brother, who said, Ray, you can go to business school and half your grade comes from debating. He didn't actually say debating, but that's the implication. I said, word? He said, yeah, man. So I applied to one business school, a Harvard Business School, and got into Harvard Business School. And I always wanted to go to law school, so it was one extra year. I had no money, it didn't matter. It was all about education. I had zero money, so it was another scholarship, just some more financial aid. So it didn't much matter if I was getting an education.
And when you graduated school, or law school and business school, you decided to go into investment banking versus going into law. What guided your decision to pursue investment banking versus going into law?
There was a graph that one of my primary mentors showed me of what you're able to generate in terms of income in investment banking for a long period of time, and what you could do in law school. And that graph is a pretty simple graph. And even for somebody who didn't know anything about investment banking, that graph was a pretty compelling graph, which is the sole reason I went into investment banking. I knew nothing about it. Anybody in my neighborhood ever been to investment banking? I actually thought Wall Street, when I came to New York, I thought Wall Street was the actual street.
Right. Right.
So I actually go down and go to Wall Street, and I'm saying, this is not such a long street. This is what this is all about. And so I did decide to go to Wall Street because of the economics and because that's where the best people in my class were going, my business school class were going, and it was, some mythical area. I said, maybe I just go there like I've been, test myself against the big boys, let's go to this Wall Street thing, figure out what that's about.
Right. Well, Wall Street obviously put you on the right trajectory. And now you've been in this position, you've been on Wall Street in excess now of 30 years, almost 35 years, 35, almost 40 years.
36 years, 36 years this October. 36 years in a month. I started in September of 1984. And I quit my job October the 15th of 2020. So that's a lot of time, man.
It is a lot of time. And you've seen a lot in those 36 years. But the one thing I would say, and we're going to come back to the pandemic of COVID-19 in a minute, but to me, there have been two pandemics that happened in 2020. One existed for a long period of time. No one really focused on it, and that's the pandemic of racism. It has existed for a long period of time. It just was brought further to light because of incidents like a George Floyd and what have you. And the other was the pandemic of COVID-19. But from a business perspective, we'll start with the COVID-19. What did you see as a change that happened from a business perspective due to COVID-19? What was it that was positive, and what was it that it was a learning part? And what was it that you think is a challenge and will be a challenge for people going forward?
So, but what I've talked about and what I will amplify here is that COVID and George Floyd was a big reveal. It revealed what we have known for years and years, and that is 400 years of systemic inequity in education and economics and healthcare and in the penal system and the carceral system. What COVID has amplified here when it gets to education is just that, is that the divide that exists between what takes place in the Black and brown communities and what takes place in the white communities, that divide has only grown much broader. It's a huge divide. Not only is it a digital divide, which has been exposed here with a lack of tablets and laptops and broadband, but it's also the educational divide that existed in the physical educational world. And the divide is large and it's growing, and we need to address it. It's actually not a divide, I'm sorry, I'm being too generous. It's a crisis. It is a crisis. It's a systemic crisis that has been ongoing for, I will say now, 66 years since the Brown versus Board of Education decision that said education here is separate and inherently unequal. Today, it is separate and inherently unequal.
Correct. We have talked about, you and I have had many conversations about corporate racism and other challenges that have been faced. But, when you talk about this divide, folks like to bring up the digital divide, the health divide, education divide, but all of those, in my view, are derivatives, if you will, of the wealth divide, right? Mm-hmm. Because those that have wealth, if you can build wealth, or you can have access to, then you have access to all of the other divides that you talked about. And so as a country, I think that we need to begin to focus on how do we build multi-generational wealth within the African-American community. African-Americans, for the most part, that are doing well have high incomes. They don't necessarily have great wealth, right? And you've certainly been around and seen and know what great wealth looks like. But that's what we have to be able to start to move ourselves towards, rather than what we have seen going forward. In corporate America, and then I'm going to sort of transition more to the thing at large, but in corporate America, as in your 36 years there. You rose to the top of the echelon, but along the way, we always kept running into the same thing, which is very few African Americans in the C-suite, very few African Americans sitting on corporate boards. And after a while, you can't just say it was coincidence, right? It's not just coincidence. There are systemic things, the same systemic problems that you see in education in the street, or you see in education, or wherever it may be. Those same systemic things exist in corporate America. Talk a little bit about what you've experienced, what you see, and what you see as the potential solve towards how do we change that? Why are we still today meeting people who walk up to you and say, at 30 years old, I'm the senior most person at my company, right? How is that possible when literally people generation after generation have gone before them, and yet we can't seem to find them inside corporate America?
You know, we need to do a better job in corporate America. It should not be the case as it was then when I came up, which if I wanted to have lunch or breakfast or a meal with someone who looked like me, that was a table of one or table for one, and that was it. Years later, while we've made some advances, we still have more to do. In 1955, a year after Brown, we started the Fortune 500. In those 60 some odd years, those 66 years, we've had 20, at best, 20 Black CEOs, Fortune 500 companies, in that amount of time. Each of whom, I must say, has been highlighted by Black enterprise. Each of whom, had it not been for Black enterprise highlighting them, their progress and their successes against all the odds may have gone unnoticed. And so it gets to the kind of attention and focus that we put on this. Remember, between 1954 and 1968, Black folk who headed the civil rights movement, and we were everywhere, front page, in large part because we're under siege. We didn't return to the headlines until 41 years later, at least mainstream headlines, with the inauguration of Barack Hussein Obama. And so the progress that we could have made between then and now is incremental to what we need to make and what we need to address to make certain that we have the talent, that talent gets exposed the way I was exposed, the way you were exposed, to the opportunities, to the possibilities, that get educated. It should not be the case, and I applaud the admission from the former dean of Harvard Business School, who said that for the past 30 years, the admissions number for Black and brown kids had remained at about 60 on average, notwithstanding the fact that they'd raised the number of MBAs in the classroom. And so we need to make not just headline grabbing responses to this, but things that are fundamental, that go against systemic challenges.
Let me pivot for a moment now to what we're all very excited about, Ray, and that is your candidacy to become the next mayor of New York City. And would love to understand and get into, you had by every measure, an extraordinary career in investment banking, extraordinary business career. And you could have continued to do so and been, sat on the beach and cut coupons and sip pina coladas for the rest of your life if you chose to, but you made a decision, which we all are very excited about, to say, you know what, it's bigger than me. It's not about just me. I want to do something more than this. I want to give back in some way, shape, or form. I want to do something to serve my community. So talk a little bit about the decision that you made, whether you sat down with your family to discuss it, or first you had to make your decision yourself to say, hey, I want to go into public service, and not just public service in general, because you do a lot of nonprofit things anyway, but I want to go into something that is in the throes of it, right? I want to go, as you call it, you were searching for the big boys. Well, you chose the big boy market for sure, to run for mayor. So give us a little bit of the insight as to that, what led you to that decision and how long it took to make that decision. And then we'll talk a little bit about where you want to go from here.
So it took a while to come to the decision. I will tell you that in addition to having a conversation with my wonderful wife, Crystal, and our 3 children, the most difficult part of the conversation was with my 94-year-old mother. When I called her on October 15th and said, Mama, I quit my job. Can you imagine that? It is like, boy, you have lost your natural born mind. How did you wait, this is what we've been doing. You had a good job, right? It was a good job. I thought it was a pretty good paying job. What happened? And so when I explained to her that all was okay, that was my decision, I said, Mama, you know, I love this city. I love New York City. This is where I met Crystal, where we're raising our children. And this city's been good to me because when I came to this city, I had a great education. I had 3 things. I had a great education. I had a lot of debt and I had no money. And this city gave me the opportunity to come here and use what you gave me as a foundation to go and compete against some of the best in the most competitive field, one of the most competitive fields. And we did okay. We did okay. And now this city needs leadership. So if I take what you taught me, if I take the experiences I've had in business, and for all those years being a leadership capacity where I've had to manage people out of a crisis and lead budgets, and I take all the relationships I've been able to develop, I can go from the streets to the suites and we can make a difference. And we talked about the word that says, when the foundation is crumbling, what will the righteous do? And so every now and then you get called. Every now and then you get called. And as you say, this is not about me, this is about we. You know,
Right.
there's never any point in time when we have to stand up for all New Yorkers, but especially those people who look like me. Now is that time, because otherwise the crisis is not going to get solved. And that's why I decided to step out, because others have stepped out. Earl Grey Sr. stepped out 50 some odd years ago. That's lots of courage and lots of conviction, the result of which each of us now saw in plain stark relief in a magazine that people look like us could get there and they could do something. There's ever a moment in time to take what he gave us and others who walked alongside him, if there's ever a moment in time to take those lessons, those hard-earned lessons, and apply them to today's crisis, then now is that time. So that's why I stepped out.
It's really, it's a great decision, Ray. I think the opportunity to put a person who cares genuinely in that position, or potentially to be in that position, is extraordinary. To put a person of color, an African-American person, in that position with a city that is as diverse as it is, will be outstanding as well. You're entering into, this is a crowded field of people, and some of whom I can't even speak to all the 32 candidates or whatever it is going to be that is running. It looks like if you had a pulse, some people decide, okay, I think I'm going to run for mayor. But let's everyone has the right to do so. Everyone has the ability to do so should they want to. Speak to us and let us know, what will be different. What's going to be, why Ray McGuire? And I don't mean, prove it to me, but I mean to everyone else. Why Ray McGuire for mayor? What are you going to do that's going to be different? What is it that you see as, the path that this city needs on? Because Lord knows, right now, I mean, a lot of us may have to do with COVID-19, some of it, but New York City is in trouble, right? I don't have to remind you that New York City is in a lot of trouble. The people are leaving New York City in droves. They are the expense of the city. You go around New York City, restaurants close, businesses close, commercial properties, and this is just in Manhattan. You can go into the boroughs, same exact thing. So tell us a little bit about your plan. What's going to make it your plan different than anybody else's plan, and how do you plan on executing it?
So let me state a couple things. One, I left my job. I didn't get termed out. I'm not looking for a promotion. I am like that great Shirley Chisholm, unbought, unbossed, and unbound. And so with that courage and conviction to make a difference in this city, in a way where the only agenda that I have is what's best for New Yorkers, especially New Yorkers who look like me. We're now in the midst of three crises, three existential crises. The crisis of COVID, it is a crisis of the economy, and it's a crisis of racial and religious injustice, discrimination that we see every single day. George Floyd could have been me. And so I take all those, I think those crises, then we have the fourth existential crisis, which is the climate and the 100-year flood that comes every year. I am the only candidate who has what they call lived experiences, how I grew up and what I've been able to do in leading and managing in business with budgets that are sometimes bigger than the state budgets. Having done that successfully out of a crisis, out of the midst of a crisis, and who's got the relationships across from the bricks to the boardroom, the relationships to bring this city together. We need to unify for the comeback. And it's got to be united, comeback where everybody's included. All the others have yet to include folks who look like me. And so what do I want to do? I want to make certain that I lead the greatest inclusive economic recovery in the history of this city. I want to restore some civility and change the narrative between the neighborhood and the police. And I'll make certain that we address the divides that are so profound and growing. And there's nobody else here who, one, has got such a Shirley Chisholm focus. Number two, nobody's got the package of the lived experiences, the business experience, and the relationships, and the vision to make sure that for one moment in time, as all the others did, as Marion Barry did, as Harold Washington did, as Maynard Jackson did, change the profile of the city, change the approach to doing business. MWBEs specifically focus, let's get Black folks involved in the MWBEs. Let's get capital of the communities. I know how to do that. I've gotten capital to the communities. We need to get folks jobs. We need to stop the gang violence. I know how to do that. And I got the relationships to make certain that we can bring all the important people in the community, bring them all to the table so that people have a voice and have a vote. Now, everybody ain't gonna agree with what I decide, but I do want to get the input in ways that we have not seen in this city, maybe since David Dinkins, where it was that inclusive. And we need to have that. We have models out there, models which you've chronicled, that have shown us that this is possible. And it needs to be more possible today than maybe it has been in the past 50 years. Because what we now know through publications like yours are just the divide. You've talked about the wealth divide, 4,000 versus 137,000. That divide is a growing divide, and it shouldn't be. We got to close that gap. And so I'd be prepared, and I will commit to directly and aggressively closing that gap. Any contract that comes to me, I'm going to review it to make certain that it's got the right profile of folks who are receiving those contracts. I will tell you, that's what I'm going to do. That's going to have on my watch.
You will bring to bear what Maynard Jackson did some 45 years ago, 50 years ago almost, in Atlanta, Georgia. And listening to you, I hear the echoes of him, who was a very good friend of my father's, and I would sit around and hear him talk about things. And I remember him saying to my father, Earl, I'm gonna shut this down. Not a hammer will fall in this city until such time as I make sure that people that look like us are getting the contracts that they should. And what always strikes me about New York City is I look around and I see these buildings coming up out of the ground, and I see renovations being done all over the place and development being done all over the place. And I keep looking for Black people, and I keep asking, where are the Black contractors? The airport being rebuilt, where are the Black people? I invite people to look around and go and see who actually, I don't mean the person who's a tier 3 supplier, a tier 4 supplier. I mean of one of the actual contracts where there are multi-billion-dollar contracts being given. That's just not being given to us. And so where you see people pulling back, and when I say pulling back, I mean citizens pulling back, They just don't believe it. And I'm not saying they don't believe you. They don't believe that New York City is trying to be inclusive. How can a city as diverse as ours there be such a gap? Even the gap you talk about, I think, is even exaggerated here in New York City, worse than it is almost any place else, because people can almost not afford to live in New York City. But it's absolutely, we are in 1,000% agreement on that. I can't wait to see someone sitting in a position that's unbought, right? That doesn't have some other political aspiration into trying to do something in some way, shape, or form, and it looks good in a resume or what have you, but really actually cares about the citizens of the city that look like us. Tell us a little bit about the process. The primary is in June.
Primary is in June.
June. So tell us a little about the process of the primary, and how do you get to the next step? You know, is there one winner at the end of June, or is it, you know, whoever has a certain percentage over a certain amount goes to a runoff? How do you get from 32 down to 1?
So you've got to go, I mean, you got to go hard in the paint. This is all about going to the neighborhoods, talking to the people. You got to go to Brooklyn, you got to go to Bronx, you got to go to Queens, you got to go to Staten Island, you got to go to Harlem. I've been out talking to people, and you got to connect with people. The biggest opportunity here is name recognition, because what I have done, the word says be known by your deeds. And so I've been known by my deeds. And I do have to say along the way here, name recognition. Part of the reason that I was able to accomplish many of the things I was able to accomplish because of Black enterprise. And so many of our youth, so many of the people I've been fortunate to mentor said, you know, I saw you on the cover of Black Enterprise, and I called you, and I reached out to you and responded to my email, and you responded to my call because I saw you there and I saw it was possible for me. And so what this is going to require is getting that message out to the community, so folks know that I'm here, that I care about all New Yorkers, but I care especially about those New Yorkers who've yet to be served. Notwithstanding all the false promises, not so that doesn't settle well with me. So you have to go into the communities. You got to talk to the people. This is the ground up. And once you've done that, when the voting takes place in June, it's called ranked choice voting. And so you have to get enough votes that you don't withstand you don't have to go through a runoff. But when the people speak, when they hear the message, then the people will speak, and that means they're going to vote. And they go for promise and change. That's what the people want, something different. It's like James Brown said, I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Just open up the door, I'll get it myself. Just give me the opportunity. And it's like the other one said, y'all talking loud, saying nothing. That's what's going down. And so you got to talk to the people and let them know there is hope. Change is here. Promise is here. Folks will get contracts. Folks is going to make certain that they get a benefit based on their talent, that they can participate here. So once we've done that, then when they go to vote 1, 2, or 3, I'm there. Put me there on the ballot, and I'm going to stand up for the people. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fight for the people, and people are going to be in the room. They're going to be at the table. What that man say, in the room when it happens, they're going to be in the room when it happens.
Right. So they have to put down 1, 2, or 3.
I'd like them to be 1 or 2.
1 or 2.
1 or 2. Preferably 1. I'm going for 1. I'm going for 1. But if some reason you get confused, 2 is good.
Very good. And if you get enough votes in the first run, there doesn't have to be a runoff then.
Doesn't have to be a runoff. We go hard early. We shut it down. I want all of us to go hard early. Let's shut it down. Let there be no confusion whatsoever. But we got to get out to vote. Get out to vote, and I'm prepared to lead. Get out to vote. I'm in.
Are we going to? So, what is the percentage of people that vote in the New York City primary? What is it traditionally been?
The numbers last time, you got to go back to, remember, we haven't had an election. We've had essentially 2 mayors in 20 years. The last one, 17% of the folks voted. Out of, that's a million and change out of, 7, 8 million. We need to get out to vote. Historically, we've not gone to the polls. We need to get out to vote. We need to treat this the same way we treated what happened in 64 and 65 when we got out to vote. We need to vote. We get out and exercise our right to vote. So we need to register, make sure we're registered, Democratic primary. So those of you who have decided you want to be on the Republican ticket, you can go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and switch your parties to make sure that you're voting Democrat. You can do that now. You got a few more days to do that. I would encourage you to do that. And then when June 22nd comes, go to the poll and vote Ray McGuire. And you can now go rayformayor.com and you can read the story and you can contribute.
Well, that's the most important thing. We got to get people out to vote. We should be encouraged by what has happened in the state of Georgia and what happened with Stacey Abrams getting those folks out. I would imagine if 17% of the folks that voted the last time there was a primary of the eligible voters, we probably had even a smaller percentage in the African American community. But this is an opportunity for us to place one of us in a position, and we will do everything we possibly can to make sure that happens. You got a strong team around you, Ray.
We're good about our team.
Yep, I see that you've got Valerie Jarrett as heading up things, which is great. What has she shared with you from her time, obviously working with Barack, that advice, if not getting advice directly from Barack, in regards to running for mayor and what will be most important, will make the difference?
You know, the most fundamental thing is the conversation amongst friends who will tell you the ins and outs, who will inspire you and give you the courage to do the right thing. And so if I look at the team that we've assembled, look at the experience of that team and the judgment of that team, you compare it against any team out there. And I'm quite confident and proud to say we got the best. And if you look at the complexion of that team, check the complexion of that team out. I don't want to say it's an all black and brown squad, but it's pretty close. Why is that? Because I know where the talent is, and this talent just needs to be given the opportunity to go and win, which is what we're about. And so again, this ain't about me, this is about we, and this is about we winning. And so we've assembled a winning team from the people who you've mentioned to Basil Smichael, to Taquana, to Eljoy, to Lupe. I mean, we got a squad here, and I'm quite proud of the squad because they're in it. It's like my man in Pulp Fiction said, he gonna get a couple of hard pipe hitting brothers, and they're gonna get, medieval. So we out here.
No doubt. And just tell us again one more time so we can make sure that we get everyone to sign on and to go to the website. And most importantly as well, as I said to our Black folks, we gotta lead with our wallet. I don't care if it's $5 or it's $5,000, but you gotta do something to, if you want to make a difference, you gotta help those who are prepared to do so. So share one more time, if you would.
The site is, and we are taking all contributions, all people who care about New York City and New York City's future. We invite you, we urge you, we encourage you to participate. rayformayor.com, rayformayor.com. We're taking all contributions, and I think what you will see in the first quarter of our raising is that we got a lot of support. We need more. So we're in the early stages of this, but we need all support, and we welcome all support.
Ray McGuire.
Rayformayor.com.
Rayformayor.com. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get behind Ray and let's support him. We're going to support you every way we can, Ray, with Black Enterprise. We know we'll get you over across the finish line. And we're all excited about the vision that you have, the passion that you have, the commitment that you have. And I'm humbled by you giving back in the way that you have and the commitment you've made to make it about us and not about yourself. And so very proud of you, my brother. Thanks again for being a part of From the Corner Office, and look forward to working through this fight all the way through June 22nd for a big celebration that evening.
Well, thank you. And I must say, thank you for your leadership, the exemplary leadership of such an iconic brand in our community. And thank you for your leadership as one of the most distinguished and renowned and respected and admired leaders in our community, but in every community. You've earned that. So total respect and admiration for you, Butch Graves Jr. It's on your shoulders and the shoulders of your family that many of us exist. Many of us have been able to succeed, including me. I'm humble, so thank you.
You're welcome. God bless.
Amen.